It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 79, and this is your host, Chris Blanchard. Daniel Allen raises 15 acres of vegetables at Allenbrooke Farms, just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. He and his wife, Stephanie, market all of their produce to 367 families through their free choice market-style CSA program. While many farmers are intensely focused on maximizing dollars per acre, Daniel has taken a perpendicular approach, grossing just $200,000 on Allenbrooke's 15 acres of vegetable production. But he does that with no season extension and just one hired hand. Daniel digs into the details of production and distribution at Allenbrooke Farms and how the free choice distribution system enables them to maximize efficiency and minimize complexity on the production side of the operation. We get into the details of their rapid harvest system, simple but effective production systems, weed management, and how Daniel keeps his body and mind in condition during the production and off seasons. He also shares the colorful history of his farming operation where he and Stephanie jumped in with both feet and sold their car to pay for seeds in 2011, their first year in production. We also hear just a little about Daniel's career as a high fashion model in New York City before coming back to the family farm in Tennessee. Farmer to Farmer podcast is made possible with the generous support of Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. VermontCompost.com. This episode of the Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are versatile, maneuverable in tight spaces, lightweight for less compaction, and easy to maintain and repair on the farm. Gear-driven and built to last for decades of dependable service. BCSAmerica.com. Daniel Allen, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
So glad you could join us today. So, Daniel, I'd like to have you start by telling us a little bit about Allenbrooke Farms, where you're located, how many acres you're farming, how you're marketing your produce.
Okay. Well, Allenbrooke Farms is a 120-acre family farm in Spring Hill, Tennessee. It's about 30 miles south of Nashville. My grandparents bought this farm in 1962, I believe. And my granddad farmed it. He did some what we call in the South truck patches, which are big vegetable patches, and raised hogs and cattle. And my grandmother raised dairy goats on it. There's 50 acres on one side of the road and 70 acres on the other side of the road. So I currently do all my vegetable production on the 70-acre side. We do about 15 acres of vegetable production, and then I have 55 acres in pasture where I have a small cattle herd that gives us all our compost. And then the other side of the road is 50 acres, and I actually have some of my grandmother's bloodline from her old Nubian goats that she used to win all the blue ribbons with, but we just have a few of those. And then the rest of that we do in hay. So our 15 acres feeds 367 families a week for 6 months out of the year. We do all on-farm pickups Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. And it's a market style where people kind of just come to the farm and pick out what they want, and works out really good for everybody.
Now, you've been farming there since 2011, right?
Yeah, we've been running the CSA since 2011. I've been out here off and on since 2003. My granddad passed away in 2004, so I started taking care of the place then, and then doing some other ventures. Me and my wife, Stephanie, got married in 2010, and we started the CSA about a year after that. I didn't really know anything about CSAs or that you could actually farm or the local food movement or anything until we got married. And she kept bringing me articles and things. And I grew up with old school farmers in my family. Like, you can't make a living farming, go to college. And we kind of like jumped in with both feet after we figured out that you could actually do it, and we just started doing it, and here we are 6 years later, and it's turned into something pretty interesting.
When you say you jumped in with both feet, tell us about getting started at Allenbrooke Farms.
Well, I grew up in a farming family. Obviously, my grandparents had this farm. across town. My great grandmother moved to Spring Hill in the 40s, and she had a farm there. So I'm actually the fourth generation farming in this spot. And we traced it back. And in Tennessee, I'm actually a ninth generation farmer. So I grew up around this my whole life, just kind of dirt farms. We raised our vegetable crops and ate that all winter and dug potatoes when I was a little kid and, store them under the house. And we'd raise rabbits for meat and kill hogs and do all that kind of stuff. But as you get older and, you go off and do other things and you don't really think about farming. Everybody tells you got to get off the farm. There's no money in it and that sort of thing. So, we get married and we find out about this CSA movement, and Stephanie's like, you already know how to do this. Cause I would just grow, a half-acre vegetable garden for fun. And I was raising cows and, I had a couple other jobs, but I was living on the farm and taking care of it. And she's like, you love doing this. This is what we need to do. I'm like, you can't make any money farming. My granddad told me you can't do that. Anyway, long story short, I started doing the research and we thought, hey, we can do this. We'll figure it out. So I quit my job. And started going to a few other CSA farms around and looking at them and seeing what they were doing. And then we made a plan to just do it. I quit my job in the summer and Stephanie quit hers in December. And we sold a little car we had literally for seed money, bought seeds. And we were lucky to have, a few tractors and a few implements laying around and some old stuff my granddad had left in the woods, and old fence rows that I cleaned out and fixed up. And we just started doing it. In the first year, we did 100 families, which looking back was probably a little bit too much, but we figured it out and we've grown every year since. And we've kind of got a really good system now. So it makes it a little bit easier.
So you guys started, 100 families, that's a pretty significant CSA for your first year without any real experience growing commercial vegetables.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely a learning experience. And, we didn't even know what we didn't know. We'd be out there, just harvest very inefficient. We had some kind of angels that came and floated down to us and helped us along, just kind of random people that would show up and help us dig carrots all day. We actually went to a farmer's market back then. There's a really nice one in Franklin, which is just about 15 miles from us. And a really good farmer's market. And we would go there and we kind of learned from talking to other farmers. And yeah, it was pretty intense that first year. The second year was a little bit more intense too, because I think we did 150 families and Stephanie was pregnant that year. So I didn't really have her out in the fields to help. So it was kind of all on me. But after those first couple of years, we kind of settled in, figured out our little niche, and we pulled it off those other years. It was just very, took a lot of effort, a lot of long days. But I've been growing vegetables since I was, a little kid. So it wasn't anything too new. I learned to drive a tractor before I ever got in a car. So, I've always been really good at manual labor and hard work. And so it kind of, went well with what I was used to doing already. So it wasn't too bad.
It's kind of funny. You say you're used to manual labor and hard work. That doesn't seem to fit in with what you were doing in New York before you came back to the farm.
Well, I was a high fashion model in New York right after high school. I got plucked up and I left the farm and I got to go travel and work with some fancy designer people and make some money and see the world. And it was a really good learning experience for me. Most of all, it really made me appreciate where I was from and how much I loved being on the farm and always wanting to get home to get back on the farm. And when I finally made the move to quit doing that, I think I was on a billboard on Times Square for Versace or something. I was like, this is enough. I'm going home to the farm. And I moved home. I moved home and started cleaning up my granddad's farm. He had gotten kind of sick. This is about 2003, 2002. He'd gotten kind of sick, and I knew he didn't have much time left, so I decided to move home and he hadn't been working this farm for a good 15 years. My dad just had some cattle on it, and so I started doing little things out here and helping him out, and started a little cattle herd and a landscaping business, and just, the city life didn't really suit me. I'm more of an outside, I like to get sweaty and dirty and see my accomplishments at the end of the day.
You said that the ground that you were farming when you came back in 2002, 2003 was all in pasture. Now, what did you do to get that ground ready for vegetable farming, or did you just plow that up and put in crops?
Well, we had been running cattle on the field that I currently grow vegetables in right now. I have like 5 big gardens in this. It's it's a 20-acre field, but or 8 gardens, I think. That had been in cattle pasture for, ever since my grandparents have been out here, and I'm imagining for quite a while before that. Really maintained, they always did stuff basically organically because they didn't have money to spray, the 2,4-D on hay fields and do all that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of cows. First thing I did was we had about, I think, like 75 head out here. So the first thing I did was, me and my dad did, we thinned them all out and went down to about, I think, like 8 mamas and locked them in the back. To kind of start a herd over again. And I had been, just growing up, every winter we feed hay out to the cows in certain spots. We always do round bales. So, and we always call it like rotted manure, which, after the season's worth of eating hay, we'd always pile it up in piles and let it sit there for a couple of years, turn it a few times. I guess they call it compost now. But, so I had piles of that stuff everywhere. And, the fields were really just basically in orchard grasses and wild clovers and that sort of stuff. So the first couple of years, we plowed everything in the fall before. And I bought a little Farmall 140. And, of course, we had tillers and discs and every kind of plow you could think of. So we worked everything up. And the nutrient content was just out of this world, and everything grew. I didn't have to really add anything other than the compost from home for about 3 years, really. It was just so rich and fat. Something about the soils here. This is kind of like about a quarter clay and 3/4 loam, and it's just really dark brown and holds water well. And our main issue is just battling all the weeds, but over the course of time they've gotten a little better. So when you got this like fresh cattle pasture that's been like that for 50-60 years in Tennessee, you don't really need to do that much to it at the beginning. There wasn't really any rocks in it. It was, I don't know, it was kind of like flipping over just like a bountiful blessing of soil. It's been cool to tend to it and add to it and watch that get even better.
And you guys have some pretty flat ground there.
It's pretty flat. Our Middle Tennessee is really hilly, so the farm does have a lot of hills, but I've got quite a few pretty flat spaces. I could probably get up to about 40 acres of vegetable production if I was inclined to. I don't know if I'm quite ready for that yet, but it's there, so we have some good creek bottom. We have quite a bit of flat spaces we can get to. It's not too rolling hills.
So tell us a little bit more about, so on the farming side, some about how you got started, but what about on the marketing side? You said you guys started off by doing a farmer's market and a CSA.
Yeah.
And you're not doing the farmer's market anymore, right?
No, we're not doing any farmer's markets or deliveries anywhere. My wife Stephanie is a born marketer. She has worked in the corporate world doing that sort of thing a lot. And her last job, they weren't really using it to her full potential, so she kind of got bored with that. But she's really good at marketing, so we just, we use social media a lot to market. And that first year, we started selling shares late fall before the spring CSA would start. So, I mean, really like 4 or 5, even 6 months before. And we just slowly trudged along, and the farmers market was real busy. They were easy to sell there. It was harder to get people to come to our house at first, but as we grew over the years at the farmers market, our name became more well known. We realized that so many people were coming to our farm that we didn't really have to get up at 3:30 in the morning and load a truck up with a couple thousand pounds of stuff and drive it to a market and set it up and sit there for 6 hours and then pack it up and bring it back home. And then by 2 o'clock on Saturday, you feel like you've been run over by a Mack truck and can't really do anything else. So we just, I think not this year, but last year we decided, hey, we'll just stop going to the markets and we'll see if everybody will come on Saturday. And it ended up being really good for us because where we couldn't do as many CSA members at the farmers market because we were limited to the amount of produce we could bring there. Because you're also expected to sell things at the farmers market. And when you don't sell stuff and you're only doing a CSA, the other customers kind of get mad at you, So if we were a little bit short on something, I couldn't sell these tomatoes because I only had them for our CSA. It didn't really fly too well at the farmers market. But here, if I'm a little short on a tomato or something, I can run in the field and get them. And I could actually triple my CSA membership on my Saturdays at the farm because I'm not expected to take all this extra to sell. So in the long run, mathematically, it actually was more profitable for us to stay at home.
So everybody comes to the farm to pick up. Then you're not taking any vegetables off the farm at this point.
No, it's real easy. We try to run everything simply. Like I said, we're doing 15 acres of produce. It's me, my wife, and we have one full-time employee.
Really?
Yeah, and I try to make it where Stephanie doesn't have to go out in the field too much. Usually around tomato time, she comes out and helps a lot. She does all the logistics and the emails and all the communication with the customers, which is just, a lot. I mean, that's more than a full-time job, and she's really good at it. She does all. So, when you're running a CSA, that is a big job in and of itself. So typically in the gardens, it's just me and my one employee, and it's easier for us because all we have to do is harvest everything, bring it down to our pickup location. If it's, which is just, a barn down by our house that we've decorated real nice. And if it's a greens or lettuce or something like that early, we'll dunk them and cool them in a cooler. And, we'll start harvesting in the morning. We'll be done by lunch. People start coming at 3:00 and everything's gone by 6. So we're not even really holding anything for a long time. We don't bunch kale. We don't bag things. A lot of times we don't wash stuff too much. Like if the zucchini's a little bit dirty, we just put it out, There's no sorting. And we communicate with our customers like it's a farm, if for y'all to be able to choose whatever you want and do it this way, you're going to have to sacrifice having perfectly clean zucchinis. After it rains, it might be a little muddy and everybody gets it, So it kind of takes a lot of labor out. We don't have to pack all the boxes and wash everything and bunch everything and count everything. And so it's kind of a wild circus sometimes, but it has like a mad scientist creativity thing you got to do with it too.
I would think that doing all of your harvest on the day that folks are picking up, I'm getting stressed out just thinking about that.
Man, really? I mean, it's probably like my 3 favorite days of the week. We harvest on Monday and Wednesday for Monday and Wednesday pickups. Obviously, Saturday pickups are in the morning, so we harvest Friday. So Friday is kind of like real nice because I've got all day to do it if I want to. But it's really not that hard. We just go out there because we don't have to count the beginning weeks when there's a lot of greens and that stuff, that sort of thing. You want everybody to get a bunch of red kale or something. So we've got 150 people coming. If I would have to sit out there and bunch 150 bunches of kale, and cut them and wash them, I'd end up having, we harvest in those big orange buckets. Like I think they kind of use them for fishing and stuff as well. They're like the bushel and a quarter. They're kind of like big colander things. But I would end up having like 10 or 15 of those things full of red kale bunches, for my 120 people that are coming. But the way I do it, I can just pick like 3 of those buckets real quick, just jam them full, and that's all I'm going to use. Does that make sense? So, obviously at certain times of the year, they're going to want more of one thing than another. But really, when you let them kind of go through it, you don't actually, a lot of that labor's cut out. So it's like, I'll go get 3 buckets of kale, 3 buckets of curly kale, go get 4 buckets of zucchini, 4 buckets of squash. And we just kind of rip through it real quick. And we'll start usually about 8 and we'll be done a lot of times by like 11:30. And then we'll be on to weed eating or cultivating or doing whatever we do. Obviously, like the big crops take more time, like potatoes and winter squash and watermelons and that sort of thing. But we'll do those in
But a
off
lot of
days.
those, right? Those are things you're going to harvest and set aside.
Yeah.
So if you're going out to harvest curly kale,
Mm-hmm.
my CSA, we always put things in boxes. Everything got packed. So if there was a kale week, we were going to go out and we were going to pick 212 bunches of kale and put one in each box. I had a number. I knew the quantity that I needed. How do you know how much kale people are going to take?
Well, you just kind of see how much they take, and like I said, this is my 5th season doing it, so I know that, especially right now, like we're still picking curly green kale right now, but we're also picking. We know we've got potatoes and onions and spaghetti squash and watermelons, zucchini and squash, so they're not using very much. So I'm picking a bucket and a half of curly green kale to pick up, but that went down from 4. And like the first pickup's always the hardest. You just go get a bunch because it's always the middle of May and there's more kale than you can even deal with anyway. You know what I mean? Like it's just everywhere. So you go get 6 buckets of each kind. In that first pickup, you see how many you use. And if you only use 2 or 3 of each kind, then the next one you get like 4 because you want it to be full at the end too. When the people come through at the end, they don't want to see like two tomatoes right there or 1 bunch of kale left for them. You know what I mean? They don't feel like, because it's the South and nobody wants to take the last biscuit. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that bucket of kale for that last 5 people that come through at the end needs to be full too. So it's really not that hard. You just kind of got to watch and see what they go through. You always like whenever we bring in a new item, especially in the spring as the seasons change and more summer items start coming in from all the just overload of salad greens and kale and things. People will take a lot at first and then they'll kind of slow down. But usually the first harvest of things you usually get in abundance, and it's planned out in the planting as well. So it really isn't that hard for me. To me, it's a lot easier because, like you said, I don't have to go pick 215 bunches of kale and bunch them. I need like 4 or 5 buckets, and we just rip the whole kale plant out, and I can pick 4 buckets of kale like that in 15 minutes at the most, and listen to some music or something.
So is that something that you've kind of structured the farm around then, a rapid harvest?
Yeah, it's a rapid, very fast harvest. I mean, we'll do things that, like, I'm sure some farmers would look at us like if we went to their farm and started doing it and they'd think we're totally crazy, but it really works. Like especially with greens and things like Swiss chard plants. And I learned this just kind of like by making mistakes, we were out, I told my guy to harvest chard a couple of years ago, and I went out there and we harvest with these big, harvest knives. I think they're called like horis. They're kind of like soil knives. They have a serrated edge. And he was out there, typically we go through and individually pick the pretty leaves, and put all of this together. But he was out there taking the whole plant and just chopping it down to like 3 inches, just stalking the whole
Right.
thing, just chopping it down. And I was like, no, 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 don't do that. I'm freaking out. And went back to the other thing. But now, 2 weeks later, I went to where he had chopped all those down, and they were the biggest, healthiest plants in the whole row.
Well, right. It's just like doing rotational grazing. They talk about that, right? You take the whole pasture down to a very low level, and then you leave it alone and let it regrow, and then you do it again.
Yeah, so that's what we do. That's what we do a lot with, especially the greens. We will just hack them down real quick with knives to just barely nothing. I mean, just the bittiest little kale leaves you can get on the plant, and leave them for a couple weeks and come back, and they're ready to go.
Now, when you say you're harvesting kale like that, you must be talking about like a red Russian style kale, not the green curly kale that grows up on the stalk.
Well,
like a palm
those will just kind of break with your hands. Typically, I'll just break those off. Yeah, the red Russians we'll use the knives on, and sometimes the Toscano, but it won't be like a straight cut on top. It'll be like two side swipes, so just where we can not injure those little bitty babies. But everything else we do take time with, and it's kind of like a slow and steady, and like keeping the pace more than just being destructive and ripping through it too, because you can't do that with your cucumbers and your squash and your zucchini and your tomato plants and stuff. But it's important to find that pace that you can maintain for 15 hours a day every day, or 12 hours or 10 or however long it may be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And, if we're getting out there early and doing that heavy lifting with the harvest, and we're just kind of slow and steady, and there's a couple of us, it doesn't take us that long. And then we can move on to other things and just kind of slow and steady and slow and steady. It's like walking a marathon, kind of.
Again, you're talking about a fairly large amount of produce in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah.
How are you guys moving stuff back to the packing shed?
I use a van, a cargo van. I found that works the best for us, and we have one here. And I got one a long time ago, so it's the same old one. It's just a kind of like, instead of a truck where everything's exposed, we're able to just throw all these baskets in the van inside in the shade, and then we'll just run them down to the packing shed and make quite a few trips. I think typically we're going through about I'd say 50 bushels of food a pickup day, 50 to 60. So it's it's really only about 4 or 5 trips with like 15 baskets in there.
And I'm curious, why are you using the baskets instead of a more traditional harvest tote?
Well, I mean, that is a harvest tote. They're the orange dealies. I see a lot of people use them. Farmers use them on Instagram. I like them because I can carry more of them at once. Really, you know what I mean? I can carry 2 of them. I can carry one in each handful of zucchini and walk 200 feet down a row, and I'm pulling 100 pounds or 80 pounds of zucchini out at once, or if I really feel like it, I can double up with 2 on each hand, especially if it's lettuce or something like that, and just get a massive amount of stuff out with each step. Okay. So I'm not like taking too many steps.
And then you said you're not doing too much post-harvest handling with this. You're basically bringing it back to the shed, cooling it down, and then setting it out for people to pick up.
Yeah, we'll cool down the greens. We don't really cool down anything else. We just put it out, because it's not there very long. If we pick peppers, we're going to if we cooled them down, when we brought them out, they would just get, sweaty and stuff in it and kind of get even more dirty. So we just kind of put them out. And, if we harvest peppers and we get, 5-6 bushels of peppers out, within 4 hours, they're all gone. And they're all at home being washed and put up in the way they need to be.
So things like carrots and beets, those are also going out then without being washed?
No, we'll wash the beets. We'll wash the carrots a little bit. This year, actually, we basically had a carrot crop failure, which I wasn't very sad about because they're so hard to get out of the ground here. But we have tons of beets. Yeah, no, we'll bring those down and we'll rinse them off and we'll wash them off. We'll typically do wash the muddier things after the harvest when it heats up and we can be in the shade and wash stuff off, kind of after lunch. And yeah, we'll clean the potatoes and everything before we put them out. We store the potatoes unwashed. But yeah, we try to get stuff as clean as we can, but we're not going to sit there and like just polish and scrub every single thing. And if we're too busy to, wipe down every zucchini, they're not going to get wiped down. You know what I mean?
So then you said that you've got 367 families coming and picking up every week.
I believe that's the number. Yeah.
Okay. How many vegetables are each of those families getting?
Well, we have the 3 share sizes. So we have our full share size, which is a half bushel. Then we have our half share, which is a peck basket or a quarter bushel. And then we have a little share, or sorry, quarter share, which is a half peck, which is a really tiny basket. People like those because there's a lot of like older people that are just like, maybe they're a single older lady, or just like, I see a lot of single people using those and they don't eat much and they're kind of just getting into the, eating clean thing. But it just depends on, obviously, right now, like those full shot size baskets, they're getting a lot of food in there. I mean, they're probably, with everything being as heavy as it is right now, I'm sure they're pulling 30 to 40, maybe even. People get kind of generous with their baskets. If we let them stack it real high, we kind of encourage them to fit as much stuff as they can in there. And a lot of times we stop people then, we're like, we sure you got enough? We let them like go up to the handle and try to teach them how to Tetris it all in there so they can fit as much as possible. So poundage wise, I don't really know. Like we don't really weigh them. We just kind of, like the full shot size baskets, they'll typically get maybe 4 or 5 grocery bags out because we have a bagging station at the end. We just let them use those baskets as like shopping carts. They have to return them at the end. That way we don't have to chase baskets around all year, which is another thing that saves money too, because we don't have to buy any of the boxes or the bags or the things that you never get back.
I mean, that's what's interesting about this, the model here. It seems like you've stripped it down to some real basics. Now, of course, this works because you're fairly close to your marketplace.
Yeah. Just so happens, I mean, when my family bought this place back in the day, it was just the little tiniest farm in town, and it was like that till forever. But in the past 10 years, it's really grown. So the town of Spring Hill now has about a 33 or 4,000 person population, and we're about 4 to 5 miles away from town. So yeah, there's quite a few people around us, which really helps. We're still a little bit out there, and we actually do have people still come from Franklin that used to go to the farmers market and pick up from us, and they just like the way we did it so much because people just around here seem to complain about the boxes, the pre-made boxes, because they're hate eggplants or something a lot.
Do you guys get people? You said you're a half hour from Nashville. Are people coming from Nashville, or is your customer base really there in Spring Hill?
Our customer base is in Spring Hill. I don't think anybody comes from Nashville. Maybe a few people do come from Franklin, which is about 15 miles away because they were old customers from the farmers market. But most of our customers come from just probably within a 10 to 15 mile radius of us. There's quite a few people here now, but when you think about it, I mean, we're only have room to do X amount of people, and say, we got 360 something people. I mean, we're not even looking at barely 1% of the population, there's a lot of room for us to grow, but I'm just kind of a firm believer that, there's people around you that need what you got, and you can find them even when you're kind of out. I mean, most farms that are way out, there's still 1,000 people around. You can get a few of them come to your house. It's just a matter of finding them and keeping them. Making them happy and communicating with them and showing them how to do this thing.
So you talk about that. I mean, it's a matter of finding them and keeping them. So how have you found those people?
Well, we found a lot of people through my wife's efforts. She's really good at marketing. So social media, of course, I know that works well for, a lot of other farmers and a lot of other businesses in general. Another thing we did was, like, when we were first starting, finding all the little local newspapers, especially like the ones that, always put the free little paper in your mailbox that you don't ask for. and because those are around every little town typically. And you get them to do a little story on you and put your information on it because they're looking for stuff to write about. And the organic local food movement, it's a pretty cool thing to write about. So we got them to do that. And so that got our word around and people heard about us. And then we kind of pushed to get accepted to that like fancy farmers market. I guess like if you're talking for starting out farmers, getting to a good farmers market is good because you can build a clientele and you can see where they're from. And, chances are they're probably not that far away from you if the farmer's market's not that far away from you. But if you're looking for people right around you, those little newspapers are good. I mean, of course, Facebook and all that lets you know where everybody is, basically. And word of mouth, once you get the customers, keeping them happy, giving them what they like, keeping things, clean and pretty and having a place where they want to come to, like our first year, we were set up kind of like a little pop-up tent in the yard and everything wasn't as clean as it was because we really kind of had to clean up this farm a lot. But so, these ladies and mamas and people that want to come get this, organic, clean food, like to have a nice place. So it's good to have flowers around. And so when they do come, they feel comfortable and it's clean and like they like the way everything, they want to bring their kids out there to see everything and, just making them happy and communicating with them. And if you do that, they tell all their friends and, we told all our friends about you. And when you get your max number, because, not all CSAs can just do all the members, there's a lot of smaller ones out here. We're only doing 100 or 300 or 50 or be it what it is. When you get that number, we start up a waiting list every year. So, because we typically sell out, a couple months before the season starts. So if, we have that to draw on when it's time to sell next year's shares as well, because there's inevitably going to be people move or people just didn't work for them because they didn't know little Johnny had baseball practice and on the day that they were supposed to come and this and that. So we have like wait lists and kind of like, I guess just doing your best and trying to keep the people happy, that's your best. Because if you got people saying good things about you and spreading the word around your community, it shouldn't be that hard to find more people as long as they can see you.
When you guys are doing the pickups, are you actually there while people are picking up their produce?
Yes, always. Yeah. We set everything up. It'll be like people come at 3:00. So they always get here a little bit early. So starting about 1:45 or so, I'll set everything up. Just baskets. We like to we call it stack it high and watch it fly, which is a thing we use at the farmers market. And we just noticed like whatever we really piled up, people would buy a lot of it. So we like to have, just everything stacked up real high. And then we have a check off and people pick up their basket and go through and we try to talk to everybody. And yeah, we're there pretty much every pickup, the whole pickup. Every now and again, I might have to jump up and do a little chore here and there, turn off some irrigation or something, but Stephanie will be down there talking to them. And I also have to be there because I have to keep it full, if other people are setting up a market pickup and they're like, we need X amount of this, and this, and everything has a sign on it, take 2 tomatoes. They kind of like have to count everything out, but we just like put it out there. So we have to make sure it stays full. So the people that are coming every hour, have a lot to choose from. It's not like dwindling down. And so, yeah, we try to be really hands-on and be there and see the people because, it's a relationship. That's what to me a CSA should be. It's a relationship between these people, this community of people, and me and my wife that are farming and feeding them. And we need to be there and they need to see us and we need to see them. It shouldn't be a faceless entity, where boxes are just going somewhere. For me anyway, I mean, I like to see them and thank them and, watch their kids grow. And it's pretty cool. We've had quite a few that have been with us the whole time now. And, their kids were like just little bitty babies and now they're, getting ready to start first grade and stuff. It's neat.
It's fun to develop those kinds of relationships. And I think a lot of the farmers that I've spoken to who have developed those relationships with their customers really value that. It's a two-way street. The customers appreciate it and the farmers really enjoy it too. And it really increases the quality of life.
Yeah. And, and they get it and they help the other newer members get it and they bring members to you. They're like, oh yeah, like we had a problem with the first couple of plantings of corn this year. I don't know, like the raccoons just went crazy on it and ate like all of it. They had a big party out there. I think the coyote population's down or something. I don't know. But, they got it. They're like, oh yeah, not much corn this year, but I see you already got tons of spaghetti squash. That's awesome. It wasn't much last year. So, and they know that some things are going to be good and some things aren't every year and some things are going to be great. And they like it and they turn other people onto it and they're your biggest advocate. It's really neat. Hopefully I'll be around long enough to have some of those kids come work out here or something like that.
There you go. Well, yeah, you're going to need to figure out a way to make more work on your farm then, if that's what you want to do.
Well, the problem is finding work. I mean, it's so hard. People people can't really hack it, right now I think the heat index is like 105 out there. It's, 80% humidity and it's just a jungle of crops and weeds everywhere. And people just kind of, it's hard to find someone that can like make it. You know what I mean?
So tell me what kind of, and I want to come back to the employee situation after the break, but just before we go here, what kind of retention rate do you guys have
for our CSA?
Yeah.
I'd say that we're upwards in the 60 to 70%. It's kind of hard to tell percentage wise because we've grown every year too. So we've had to get new members every year basically because we started, with 100 and then went 150 and then went 200 and then 250 and 360. So, I'll tell you this, we do things different. We don't start selling shares in like January or February when most people do. We start selling them in October before the CSA is over. So all of our customers, but we only sell them to our customers and to the waitlist people at that time. And we have I think last year we probably had like 70-something% of the people re-sign that were current members that month of October and maybe into November a little bit. But I don't really know which other current members signed up after that. It's pretty good. I mean, I guess I've never really totally tracked it and done all the numbers just because we don't have time for tracking and numbers and charts and things. We just kind of have to we can do our finances, but after that, we're just kind of just doing.
So with that, we're going to take a break, get a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back with more from Daniel Allen of Allenbrooke Farms, just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is made possible with the generous support of Vermont Compost Company, makers of Fort V and Fort Light potting mixes for certified organic transplant production. And while it's hard to start thinking now about next year's potting soil in the middle of the current season, you don't want to miss participating in Vermont Compost Company's fall pre-buy program. When you order Vermont Compost potting soil for next year's growing season, you can save significantly on the finest potting soil that I personally have ever used. There are many great options for significant savings. Vermont Compost Company organizes shared truckload weeks when they organize and group orders by state or region. When you place your order to ship on one of these shared truckloads, they offer discounts on the purchase of your potting soil. Plus, they consolidate the orders so growers also save on shipping fees. Now, if you want to get the best possible deal on Vermont Compost potting soil, order a full truckload. If you don't need a full truckload yourself, get together with your farming friends and neighbors and order a full truckload together. This option offers the best possible price per sling bag or pallet and the best possible shipping rate. It's also the best option for growers who are a great distance away from Vermont. Growers who pre-buy full truckloads often end up paying a price for their sling bags that is lower than what growers pay for a sling bag picked up in Vermont. The fall pre-buy program runs September 21st to December 21st. For more information, visit the website vermontcompost.com. Bandwidth for the Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are often mistaken for just a rototiller, but it's a truly superior piece of farming equipment. Engineered and built in Italy where small farms are a way of life, BCS tractors are built to standards of quality and durability expected of real agricultural equipment, the kind of dependability every farm needs. I've worked with BCS tractors for over 24 years, and I wouldn't consider anything else for my small tractor needs. And I'm not the only fan. More than 1.5 million people in 50 countries countries have discovered the advantages of owning Europe's most popular two-wheel tractor. And these really are small tractors with the kinds of features found on their four-wheeled cousins and a wide array of equipment: power harrows, rotary plows, flail mowers, snow throwers, sickle bar mowers, chippers, log splitters, and more. Check out bcsamerica.com to see photos and videos of BCS in action. bcsamerica.com. All right, and we're back with Daniel Allen from Allenbrooke Farms in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Daniel, so you mentioned two things that I think that I wanted to follow up on just kind of concurrently here. You said you got just one full-time employee that's working for you, but you also mentioned that you guys are you really focus hard on that harvest activity, but then you're kind of swimming in the weeds and the vegetables and through the humidity there that you've got. Tell us a little bit about how things work with that one employee, because that seems a little bit shy for your size of an operation.
Yeah, it's a little bit shy, but again, we do things a little bit more simple too. There's definitely, it's down here, it's a jungle, so weeds pop up quick, but for the most part, like what we'll do with a crop is we grow everything on about 48-inch centers, and I grow it single row. I grow everything single row, kind of like old tobacco crops, or like truck patches, like they call them down here, with that same equipment, because we can't find any of the cool like Alice Chamber Gs or neat cultivating things around here. So we can get Farmall 140s. And I found it like as a time saver, if I just have it set up one way, I grow everything that same way, and I don't have to be like changing cultivators around and knives around and setting up to 2-row or 3-row or this and that. But
so Daniel, I'm actually going to stop you there, because in a world where the conversation is oftentimes dominated by Elliott Coleman, JM Fortier, and these other really intensive production growers, you're saying you're growing everything a single row 40-inch center. So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're doing then is if you're putting out head lettuce, it's a single row of head lettuce.
Yep.
And then, of course, the same thing with something big like corn or tomatoes.
Yeah, everything. I mean, of course, they'll be, different on the spacing or whatever, but, we'll do onions at a foot. And we do those kind of like Elliott Coleman, like in bunches, where we'll do like 3 or 4, like a cluster of them, but they're all single row. So it makes it a lot less weeding for us, and we can run through and cultivate and then just hoe things out while they're little. And keep them real clean. And then once they get established and get big, we'll keep them out as clean as we can. But I don't really see the point in, super weeding a crop, a row of lettuce that I'm going to harvest in a week. So like once it gets to a certain point, I kind of just don't really worry about the weeds, because I know I'm just going to go through and cut it out.
Right.
And so I don't spend that time on making everything picture perfect and clean. And I've also noticed that it was one of your podcasts maybe last year, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he liked to do a lot of natural farming and, purposely let some weeds come up in some spaces to shade things and blanch things. And I do a good little bit of that too, and experiment with that after listening to that. And I kind of feel like in some spots the weeds are very beneficial, especially when it's really hot, like in a potato patch, and you haven't had time to dig the rest of them out yet, and you let a weed crop come in and shade them out. It'll hold them down there in the ground for an extra couple of weeks, and it's no problem to mow them and then just dig them out. And I don't know. A lot of times the weeds aren't really that bad. Of course, I find when the plants are little, we spend a lot of time on them. But like I said, slow and steady. You run the Farmall through a couple rows of cucumbers, and you can hand weed them in the evening. Pretty leisurely in an hour or so, or hoe them anyway. I don't have time to subscribe to the really intensive gardening. It's just too much labor, for me and my size. And I feel like I would be not being able to feed as many people, because to have those little beds with 4 rows and have to hand weed and hand hoe through every single one of them, we just don't have the time for that.
Well, and I think a lot of it comes down to what your limiting factor is.
Mm-hmm.
You said that it's hard for you guys to find good help down there. And you've clearly got a lot of land to work with. So,
yeah.
I think this is where you've there's no one size fits all solution for a farming system.
Yeah, and it's also we've tried the interns and the woofers and that sort of stuff, and they never really work out for us. And the volunteers, and I end up having to spend the whole day with them, making sure they're not destroying things or that they're not overheated and this and that. So really, I don't, I could probably find a bunch of people to come out here and work they'd probably be interchanging. You know what I mean? I'd probably go through one every month or so. But I also don't really want to give all the farm money away and to payroll, because that money can be used to plant more trees or to build more infrastructure or pay ourselves more or save or do that sort of thing. And I found that doing the system I have, it's simplified it. And I'm, even if my guy goes down, like he got a little hot today and didn't feel good, so I sent him home early. But before this call, I picked up 3,500 pounds of watermelons and put them up, and then came in here and got, and like, I feel like I've made this system where I can feed this many people without having to hire that many people. So I don't really need to. I just need to take care of myself and feed myself, and, in the off season, train myself so that I can be physically capable and it not, destroy me, basically.
So the one helper that you do have, where did you pick that person up?
Well, his name's Antonio, and he was working for my dad and working for like landscaping companies and stuff. But he grew up on a farm growing pumpkins and corn and sweet potatoes and stuff. And the first couple of years, I didn't have any employees, and then he came to work with me the third year part time, and it really helped out. And I realized I'd be able to basically double. I was doing like 100. Doing like 150, 170 members, like by myself with me and Stephanie. And I figured if I got him on board, I could double it. So we basically did that. And I keep him full time year round. So in the winter, he doesn't have to work as hard. And, we work the greenhouses and plant seeds and, clean up old fence rows, maybe do fencing projects. So also because I don't want to lose him, and he's trained up so well now, he's kind of like my right hand. You know what I mean? Like I don't even have to tell him; he can just show up and he'll goes and knows what needs to be done. So so instead of like having to train a new employee every year, I've had him. This is the third year now, and he just kind of knows the drill. He'll show up tomorrow, know that he needs to get a couple of buckets of kale, a bucket of chard. Start picking cayenne peppers and jalapenos and shishitos, and then we'll go from there,
Well, and I suppose, it's another one of those advantages you have from really simplifying your system, not having to train people again and again, being able to have, that one person. We spent a lot of time on the podcast in some recent episodes talking about systems for managing employees and, paperwork and work orders and evaluation meetings. And you're probably able to cut out a whole lot of that just because of the way you're farming.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, I, as far as the farming, like the tractor work, harvest work, cultivating, all of that sort of stuff, I myself am basically 80% of the workforce. So, I can have the meeting with myself of what needs to be done before I'm going to sleep. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't have to deal with any of that. The main part is keeping yourself healthy and strong enough to do that. But also in doing it, it kind of, it does that too. Um, it's a lot of work, but we also have we're very seasonal. We don't do season extension stuff. We do a CSA from the middle of May to the end of October, and that's it. After the end of October, whatever's in the gardens, it just can be in the gardens. I might go get some stuff to eat. You know what I mean? But then, so I basically have November, December, January, and we'll starting onions in the greenhouse towards the end of January. And then, workload kind of increases, but until like May, really, the workload's not that hard, but I'll spend 4 or 5 months in the off season resting, eating well, doing, going to the gym and doing a strength program to kind of train for the next year's season. So I can, walk 15 miles a day while carrying 100 pounds, basically.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
really helps out. I've done that the past 2 years, and I mean, it really makes a big difference. You can just do more. If you a lot of people farm and they farm their animals and they're really interested in the percentages of proteins that the animal feeds are to make their animals grow a certain way, but they neglect to do that for themselves. And if you do that for yourself, you can actually, get to where, harvesting 50 bushels of food in a day is really not that hard.
Right. Really thinking of yourself as a farming athlete
Yeah,
rather than just as a
exactly. Like I'd rather go pick all the squash right now than go to the gym and do 350-pound squats. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. So what are you doing now to take care of yourself? I mean, obviously you've got the physical work, but I mean, it's physically demanding work. It's mentally stressful. And again, you guys don't have there's not a whole lot of slush in your plan. It doesn't sound
No,
like.
there's not too much. Well, we take a break in August because the Tennessee Augusts are so brutal and just nothing really wants to grow but okra and peppers, and then all the
Right.
potatoes you got stockpiled away. So right now I've got like 3 weeks until we get a couple-week break. And like I said, I spent so much. I stopped doing the strength and the gym stuff probably around the middle of June, just because the workload outside's so hard, and that gives you like way more than enough. And it's basically just like nutrition, making sure you're eating enough protein, eating enough carbs, eating enough fats, sleeping 8 hours, drinking enough water. And just pacing yourself. Like I said, you're not going to go try to run a marathon in a sprint. Sometimes you can get through it just fine. If you walk, it might take a little longer, but you're not going to have shin splints and torn tendons and stuff. You know what I mean? Because that happened to me my first couple of years. I started hurting my tendons, like in my shoulders and elbows. And once I, made sure I was getting the proper percentage of carbohydrates and fats and proteins and doing a strength regimen in the off seasons, I just kind of stopped.
Huh. I like that really deliberate approach to it and really thinking about it. I mean, you change the oil in the tractor in the wintertime.
Yeah. You feed you get a load of baby chicks in and you feed them this certain amount of food that's mixed up wherever you bought it from. And it's a relegated amount of this thing that you feed them, and that makes them grow and be healthy and strong. So you can't be out there farming all day and then come in and eat a salad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to get a lot of calories in you to fuel that. I mean, you're basically like doing 2-a-days at football practice for high school. You know what I mean? It's rough out there.
I'd like to dig in a little bit more on your actual crop production system. Now, you guys are certified organic, right?
Yes.
And how long have you been? I assume that you started off basically farming organically.
Yeah, we've always grown organically, even beyond that a little bit. But we just got certified this year. This winter, we got certified.
And I'm curious why you made that choice. It seems like with your marketing, and you talked about the intensity of the relationship marketing and the referral business that you're doing, and having a pretty strong retention rate. Why go through the trouble and the expense of getting certified organic?
Well, there's a few reasons. Because there's a lot of these catchwords out right now. And as the local food and everything is getting so trendy, I mean, you can walk into an IKEA and find a picture that says local, organic, naturally grown, farmer. We actually bought one that, yeah, just always, you know what I mean? And there's all these names, and there's all these farmers at all these farmers markets that, yeah, I'm organically grown and I'm beyond organic and I'm certified natural and I'm biodynamic and I'm blah, blah, blah. And really those people have bought stuff from the Amish people down a few counties away and brought it up and stuff, And all the questions that, because you get 360 something families involved, there's quite a few people and there's quite a few questions, and we just felt like that we were the ones doing it right, and that it would give us a way to tell people and show people without having to answer a bunch of questions or make up a bunch of polyculture biodiversity catchphrase names. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
we're certified organic, we grow organic, and that's what we do. And we have that stamp of approval. Our food is ours. We're not buying it from somewhere and trying to pawn it off as an organically grown thing, and it's like a legitimacy. And I kind of feel like that's important now, because people are getting on the bandwagon. I read an article in the New York Times just last night about how there's the fake CSAs up in New York and California, and they're really just people like, being middlemen for farmers and other groups that aren't even really, you don't even really know if it's local. Like, how are you getting local oranges in New York, kind of, in a CSA kind of thing.
Right.
So I feel like, and it's a standard to achieve. And unless you achieve that standard and can prove it, then you can't be called that. Does that?
And I think, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Otherwise, I can be any kind of, I'm naturally chemical free, holistic, polycultural food. You know what I mean?
I think the other big advantage that this has, and I think this is especially important in a place like Tennessee where there aren't a whole lot of you, is that being certified organic makes it so that you can be counted as an organic farmer.
Yeah. And
if you're not certified, you're not organic. You don't get counted that way when somebody's figuring out how much money to give to organic research through the USDA or the university or whatever. Those, you're not taken into account in that.
yeah, I agree. And it is important to do for that. It's also, I mean, if you are growing organically and you have been growing organically, it's not very hard to become certified organic, because you have your records of what you used and what you've done. And if you can prove that for a couple of years, I mean, it really wasn't that hard. It was a good thing to do in the winter. We sat down and filled out the application and went through the whole process. And the state of Tennessee, gave us some grant assistance to help with it, and it wasn't very expensive for us either. So to me, it was just kind of like a no-brainer. And just the accountability. And just down here, we've heard so many times about people, buying things that they really didn't grow and not letting people come to their farms and visit how they grow things and stuff. And we just wanted to be like, we're certified organic, we're inspected, and that's how we roll.
So tell us a little bit more about your farming system and farming on those 48-inch centers. How are you guys making that work on a day-to-day basis? You guys transplanters, mechanical seeders? Is it all of the work being done by hand except for the cultivating?
Well, no, we are pretty mechanized. We have, water wheel transplanter. We have all the kind of plows and discs and huge tillers and all of that kind of fun stuff. So we'll work the ground however it needs to be worked, depending on the moisture content and what we've had in there before, be it cover crop or whatnot. Like, say if we're going to destroy a vetch cover crop, I'll flail mow it, and then we'll incorporate that in. Then I'll let that sit for a little bit. I'll either turn it or I'll disc it real hard, or maybe lightly till it. Then typically I'll chisel plow it out, just because our clay content can make things kind of get compacted pretty good. So I'll chisel plow it out. I typically do the compost and everything in the fall before the cover crops go in on everything. That way I can get time for whatever weeds are in there to, or at least some of the weeds that are in the compost
Right.
to germinate and then maybe get fried off, by frost or something. So anyway, we'll destroy that cover crop, and then I'll chisel plow it, let it sit for a little bit, and then I might add a little more fertilizer to it if I'm going to grow like a heavy crop like corn. And we've been using Mighty Grow this year. I think it's out of Alabama. It's kind of like a composted chicken OMRI approved fertilizer stuff. I really don't use much of that. I'm more compost and cover crop driven, soil fertility. But so what we'll do is when that's ready, I'll get it ready for seed beds or whatnot. If there's seed beds, I'll mark the rows out with either my Farmall 140 or I'll do it with I have a John Deere 5065E, which is actually on almost like a 60-inch center, but I'll just overlap the tracks, and then typically I don't, if I'm doing seeds, I'll just use like a Jang seeder and just push it because I'm only really going to be doing like 4 or 5 rows. So I don't really see the need to have one that's attached to a tractor, when I can go out there and put the headphones in and walk 1,000 feet pretty easy, I can't really justify the $2,500 or whatever for the fancy thing that hooks onto the tractor.
The single row system that you got, those kinds of really precision row spacings that you get with putting something behind the tractor, aren't really an issue for you.
Yeah, I don't need it because if it's got a little curve in it when I'm going through with the Farmall on the first couple cultivations, it's not really an issue. So if we'll seed it like that. If we're doing transplants, we actually ride the transplanter on either the 5065E or the 5075E, and we'll just overlap the tires to put it at that 48-inch center and just plug them right into the ground. We used to do the plastic mulch a good bit, but I've really moved away from it in the past couple of years. It just, to me, I end up spending more time dealing with the plastic mulch than with if I just would have cultivated it a couple times and then gone in and harvested it. By the time you have to clean out the centers and weed eat everything because just things grow like crazy here and the crop gets too tall to cultivate in between the plastic. So you have to weed eat it and then you got to get the plastic out. And then those middles are really hard and compact. It's just a lot of work. So I kind of don't really use that anymore. I will use it on tomatoes and peppers, and on okra. I've been doing it on tomatoes, peppers, and okra, and that's pretty much it. But anyway, so we'll transplant it or we'll seed it. A lot of times we don't really put much irrigation out. If it's real hot right now and I'm going to start seeding lettuce in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably put some drip line on top just to get it to germinate. And then, as the plants pop up, we'll run the cultivator down each section once when everything's just little bitty and get the threaded weeds out, and we'll hand hoe each section. And then we'll do that about twice. And usually after that, things are, especially the quick crops like all your brassicas and lettuces and that sort of thing, they're pretty much clean enough. And if we get like a little weeds in the middle, it actually makes it a little better to harvest when it's wet. Because we're not just like ankle deep in mud, if we can kind of get a little turf going in there.
That was something I wanted to ask about because it feels like between those 48-inch centers, that's a lot of bare dirt.
It is, and that's why we'll just clean out the centers like twice, let the plants get good and established, and then we'll let those centers. We kind of got like a wild Bermuda grass or something that's out there, and we'll let that stuff come in. And then if we have to, we'll weed it once, and it makes a really good like tight little turf that we can walk down real comfortably. Especially in the rain, because it just all of a sudden the past few years just rains here all the time, so we're always harvesting in the mud, So when you have a little grass path, it kind of helps. And that reason we don't make an effort to keep everything super pretty. Like if the weeds are harming a crop, I'll deal with it. If they're not, I'll kind of just watch them. And a lot of times, we'll let some weeds come up in the potato patch, and I got some ironweed stuff, and we had some potato beetles eating that and leaving the potatoes alone.
Nice.
Yeah, we don't really spray much, actually, ever either. I don't like spraying things, so. I feel like with a lot of diversity out there, a lot of different, even the grasses in the pastures and the bugs in the pastures, everything kind of has a way of working itself out, typically. And with our model, we plant a lot extra just because I've learned it's better to have way too much because it doesn't cost me much to have a bunch of extra. In the worst cases, I'm throwing it away or feeding the little mini pigs or something with it. It's a lot better than not having enough. So,
and again, you've got this system where you put out too much kale. So what?
Yeah, basically.
I mean, again, if you're sitting there plucking weeds out of a 12 rows on a 30-inch bed, you need to sell every leaf of salad greens.
Yeah, no, I'd rather be pulling food out than pulling weeds. You know what I'm saying?
There you go.
I'd rather pull 400 heads of lettuce out of a row in an hour than spend 2 hours taking the weeds out, then pull the heads of lettuce out. You know what I mean? So basically, yeah, we kind of run everything just like that. The bigger crops, like the corn, we might hill them. We might throw some hillers on it. And of course, we cultivate the potatoes with hillers, but I only cultivate the potatoes twice ever in a season, and I never irrigate them. And I'll let the weeds come up on them. And because you never know down here, like a month ago, it was already 100 degrees, and the potatoes were, if they'd been bare dirt out there and just plants, they would have cooked on those hills. And then you got 2,000 pounds of potatoes gone that you need in September. You know what I mean? It works for us. And, we don't, like I said, we don't have to have as much labor to keep everything picturesque and super perfect all the time. That being said, a lot of stuff is clean and really nice looking. I don't want to just totally say my gardens are the ugliest things ever, but
right. But I think, again, what works here, and what I think it was an important message in Bob Kennard's episode as well, who does kind of I would think of a what would you call it? A weed friendly farm out in California.
Yeah.
That I think part of it works because of the other factors that you have in your farm and the way that you're farming. It's not, you can't tolerate weeds in a JM 40A intensive, $150,000 on an acre and a half market farm. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
But in your system, get some weeds, it's not a big deal. And you have something go to seed, well, you're going to cultivate it out next year. And it's not like you're going to be picking it out of this 12 rows on a 30-inch bed salad mix.
Yeah. And it's a jungle here. Anyway, if you spent 5 years and totally decimated every weed on the property and never let any one of them go to seed and turned your gardens and let them be, and it had been 5 years since anything went to seed, and you turn it fresh, fallowed it, and let it hang out, within 3 weeks, it would be in a blanket of seeds out here. It's a jungle, and they blow in from the wind, and there's just no stopping it anyway, so why fight it so hard? That being said, I'm still harvesting leeks right now in 100-degree heat because I've let the grass come up over them, and they're totally shading them. And they're really nice. I wouldn't have that if it'd be super clean and pretty. They got burned up and rotted out already. You know what I mean?
Right. So really what it comes down to is that you're managing the weeds.
Yeah.
You're not eliminating the weeds.
Yeah. I'm purposely letting a good bit come up in some places. And not in other places, I like weed eaters a lot. I mean, because sometimes those taller weeds can get up in something and you can just knock the tops down and then they're done. And then your big vining crop or your, spaghetti squash or butternut squash or whatever just takes those over and it's gone. And instead of hand pulling a bunch of thorny weeds out for 4 hours, you went down with a weed eater for 20 minutes and it was done. And then 2 weeks later, you couldn't even tell, it's just a beautiful acre of vines. So I just, the $150,000 on an acre of stuff, super intensive things. I mean, it probably takes a lot more man hours and labors than 15 acres, doing 300 and over 350 shares. You know what I mean? I'm not making $100,000 an acre, but collectively in man hours wise, we're doing all right.
Would you mind sharing how much you guys are grossing in a year?
We are grossing a little bit over 200 now every year with just the CSA. which is really good for us. Cause I mean, like I said, my payroll is only about $700 a week. And we own all the tractors and all the equipment, so we don't really have any debt or anything. And we're able to have a really comfortable, nice life, and it's fulfilling. And we can go on vacations in the winter and, do fun stuff. And it's nice. I like the seasonality of it, of about when everything's just getting too hard, you can't handle it, it stops. And then about when you're bored of it being stopping, you get to get back to it, So it's a nice life, And it's a lot, like I said, it's easier for me to do 12 acres of something in this way than it would be for me to do an acre another way.
All right. So with that, Daniel, it's time for us to turn to the lightning round.
All right.
As we're nearing the end of our show here. So what's your favorite tool on the farm?
Tractor, all things tractor, any kind of tractor. I've had a love affair with tractors since I was probably 3 years old. I remember our first one was like a 52 Alice Chambers. It was my great granddad's, and I used to drive it around. Tractors, they do everything. I'd have a hard time dealing without them.
If you had to pick just one tractor,
I really like. We've had a number of tractors through the year with my family's farm. We have like 6 right now. My favorites are these little new John Deere 50 series. We have a 5065E and a 5075E, and I use the 65E a lot. And just for the size tractor it is, it has so much gumption. And I mean, I've pulled 3-point turning plows with them, and they're little, and it's a gardening tractor, and it's all everything tractor. I really like it. And for the value, it's been a workhorse for me. So I'd say my 5065E. However, about a year ago, I got a totally redone Farmall 140 that had been just completely broken apart and put together by some sort of master. And it's like a mint condition, just runs like a sewing machine. I kind of like her too. Oh, it's so nice. I mean, it should be on display somewhere, but I'm afraid I'm kind of messing it up by using it all the time.
Man, I think a tractor on display, there's something wrong about that, right? Tractors are meant to be used.
Oh, yeah. Anything that is old and has a agricultural use should be used, I think.
And what's your favorite crop to grow?
Potatoes. I love growing potatoes. We do probably 2 to 2.5 acres of potatoes every year. And being down in the South, we're all meat and potatoes kind of people. So we use about, I'd say 200 pounds of potatoes a pickup. So that's about 700 pounds of potatoes we use every week. And I just love them. They're like one of the first things you get in the ground. I love the hills. I love, typically on a potato crop, I'll put about 30 tons of compost down. And I love the whole thing. It's like the first thing you get to do. I like watching them grow. I like digging them out because it's kind of like a treasure hunt, like Easter egg kind of thing. Like, how'd they do this year? Oh, we got an 8-fold yield this year. Good. I love potatoes and onions are my favorite.
And if you could go back in time, tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
I would tell myself to just focus just on the vegetables, because the first year I tried to do it all. You know what I mean? I tried to have some meat hogs and chickens, and we tried to like sell jams and jellies and do all this stuff. And I've learned through the years it's better just kind of focus on one thing and do it really well instead of getting a bunch of irons in the fire, because then you start missing little things here and there. So I'd tell myself to just kind of take it a little easy, and probably I'd also tell myself to start working out in the off season sooner.
Daniel, thank you so much. This has been a really great episode, really a lot of interesting stuff, and I think a ton of value. So thank you so much for making the time to do this today.
Cool, man. Thank you.
All right, so wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 79 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast, and you can find the notes for this show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page or just searching for Allen. That's Allen. Today, I'd like to start the tractor as a shout out to one of the Farmer to Farmer podcast's biggest supporters, Steve Pincus and Beth Kazmar of TP Produce. Thank you so much, Beth and Steve, for all you've done for me and for the show. If you value the podcast, you can show your support in any of several ways. If you value the podcast, you can show your support in several ways. You can become a patron of the show by setting up a monthly donation through Patreon, which is kind of like Kickstarter for ongoing projects. Or you can do a one-time donation through PayPal, which would also be awesome. Plus, if you use the Amazon.com link on farmertofarmerpodcast.com, Amazon gets a percentage of what you spend back to the show, and it won't cost you a penny more. Go to farmertofarmerpodcast.com/Amazon to get that link. Heck, if you bookmark it, you could do it every time you go and shop on Amazon. farmertofarmerpodcast.com/donate has more information and all the relevant links. Thank you so much for your support. On the non-monetary side of things, reviews and referrals are the bread and butter of our business. And so if you enjoy the show, please bounce on over to iTunes or Stitcher, leave us a review. Sign up for my email list at farmertofarmerpodcast.com or purplepitchfork.com. And please note, I do love to get your guest suggestions. This episode is a direct result of those suggestions, so please keep them coming at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Be safe out there and keep the tractor running.